Story 1. It was Christmas Eve, and Sarah was driving home from a holiday party at a friend's house. The roads were slick with ice, and snow was falling heavily, making it difficult to see. Sarah was tired and eager to get home to her family, but she knew she needed to drive slowly and carefully. As she turned onto her street, Sarah noticed something strange. There was a man standing on the sidewalk, bundled up in a heavy coat and scarf. He was holding a large sack over his shoulder, and he was staring directly at her. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as she realized that the man was dressed as Santa Claus. Feeling uneasy, Sarah drove past the man and pulled into her driveway. She thought about calling the police, but she didn't want to overreact. After all, it was Christmas Eve, and it wasn't uncommon to see people dressed up in holiday costumes. As she stepped out of her car, Sarah heard the sound of bells jingling. She turned around to see that Santa Claus was walking towards her house, his sack slung over his shoulder. Sarah tried to move quickly, fumbling with her keys as she attempted to unlock the front door. But before she could open the door, Santa Claus was upon her. He grabbed her by the shoulder, and Sarah felt a coldness seep through her body. She turned around to face him, but his face was shrouded in darkness. All she could see were his beady, black eyes, glinting with malice. Sarah tried to scream, but no sound came out. She felt as if she was suffocating, as if the very air had been drained from her lungs. She tried to struggle free, but Santa Claus held her fast. Suddenly, the front door swung open, and Sarah's husband appeared. He saw Santa Claus holding his wife and lunged forward to defend her. But as he got closer, he too felt the coldness spreading through his body. Santa Claus cackled with delight as he held the couple in his grasp. He reveled in their fear and their desperation, relishing in the power he had over them. As the night went on, Santa Claus forced the couple to do his bidding. He made them decorate their house with creepy ornaments and forced them to listen to horrifying Christmas music. He made them cook a feast fit for a king, only to watch as they were forced to eat it all themselves, with no company but the maniacal Santa Claus. For hours, they were trapped in their own home, unable to escape the clutches of this malevolent being. They watched in horror as Santa Claus unleashed his twisted version of Christmas upon their once festive home. Finally, just before dawn, Santa Claus disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared. The couple was left alone, shaken and traumatized by the night's events. She was excited for Christmas morning, eager to see what present Santa would bring her. But as she closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep, she heard a strange noise outside her window. At first, she thought it was just the wind rustling the trees. But then she heard it again, a low, growling noise that made her heart race with fear. She sat up in bed, peering out into the darkness, trying to see what was making the noise. And then she saw it, a large, black bear, standing just outside her window. It stood before her, towering over her small frame, its hot breath on her face. Lily was frozen with fear, unable to move or scream. The bear reached out with its paw and swiped at her, its sharp claws cutting through her skin like a knife through butter. Lily felt the pain course through her body, and she knew that she was going to die. But then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the bear vanished. Lily was left alone, bleeding and terrified, but alive. She could hear the sound of footsteps running down the hallway, and she knew that her parents had heard her screams. They rushed into her room, their faces contorted with fear and concern. They saw the deep gouges in the window and the blood on Lily's arms, and they knew that something terrible had happened. As the police arrived and began to investigate, they found no trace of the bear. But Lily knew that it was still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting to strike again. For years, Lily lived in fear of the bear, never daring to venture into the woods or even outside after dark. She knew that it was still out there, watching and waiting for its next victim. And so, as you celebrate Christmas this year, dear reader, be sure to keep your doors and windows locked. Because you never know when the Christmas bear might come calling, ready to strike when you least expect it. Story 3. It was Christmas Eve, and the town of Pinevale was decorated with bright, colorful lights and festive ornaments. But as the night wore on, a strange feeling of unease began to settle over the town. People reported strange sightings and eerie noises coming from the nearby woods, and rumors of a mysterious group of strangers started to spread. As the night deepened, the townspeople gathered in their homes, trying to ward off the fear that had taken hold of them. But their efforts were in vain, as the sound of rustling leaves and snapping twigs grew louder and closer. Suddenly, a group of figures emerged from the woods, shrouded in long black cloaks and carrying lanterns that cast a sickly green glow on their faces. The townspeople watched in horror as the strangers made their way through the deserted streets, their eyes fixed on their targets. As the strangers approached each house, they left behind a trail of destruction. Windows shattered, doors creaked open, and the eerie green light illuminated the chaos they had caused. The townspeople huddled together in their homes, praying for safety and protection from the nocturnal invaders. But as the night wore on, the strangers became bolder and more violent. They broke into homes, dragged out screaming children, and disappeared into the night. The townspeople tried to fight back, but they were no match for the strength and determination of the nocturnals. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, the nocturnals retreated back into the woods, leaving behind a trail of devastation and despair. The townspeople emerged from their homes, dazed and traumatized, their once peaceful town now a scene of horror and chaos. In the weeks that followed, the townspeople tried to make sense of what had happened. Some believed that the nocturnals were a group of demonic creatures sent to punish the town for its sins, while others speculated that they were a cult bent on sacrificing innocent lives to their dark master. Regardless of their origins, the nocturnals had left a permanent mark on Pinevale, one that would never be forgotten. And as each Christmas approached, the townspeople would lock their doors and windows, praying that the nocturnals would never return to terrorize their town again. So be warned, dear reader, and keep a close eye on the shadows this Christmas Eve. For the nocturnals may still be out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for their next opportunity to strike. Story 4. In a small village tucked away in the remote mountains of Mexico, there lies a tradition that has been celebrated for centuries. It is called the Festival of the Dead, and it is held every year on the Day of the Dead. The villagers believe that on this day, the spirits of the dead return to the land of the living to visit their loved ones. And so, they prepare a feast of offerings to appease the spirits and welcome them back into their homes. But this is not just any ordinary feast. It is a feast of flesh. For weeks leading up to the festival, the villagers collect the bodies of the deceased from nearby towns and villages. They bring them back to their village and carefully prepare them for the feast. On the Day of the Dead, the villagers gather in the town square, where a massive bonfire has been lit. They dance and sing, celebrating the return of their loved ones. And then, the feast begins. The villagers consume the flesh of the dead with a frenzied hunger, tearing into the limbs and organs with their bare hands. The smell of roasting flesh fills the air, and the sound of bones cracking echoes through the village. As the night wears on, the villagers become more and more frenzied. They dance and chant around the bonfire, their bodies writhing in a grotesque dance of death. And then, the spirits arrive. The sky turns black, and a chilling wind sweeps through the village. The villagers pause in their feasting, their eyes wide with fear. And then, they see them. The spirits of the dead, rising up from the flames of the bonfire. They are twisted and distorted, their faces contorted in agony. The villagers scream and run, but there is nowhere to hide. The spirits chase them down, their ghostly hands reaching out to drag the living back into the flames. In the end, only a handful of villagers survive the night. They flee from the village, never to return. The Festival of the Dead continues to this day, but it is shrouded in secrecy. Those who have witnessed the feast and survived are sworn to silence, for fear of the spirits' wrath. So beware, dear reader, and never venture into the mountains of Mexico on the Day of the Dead. For the Festival of the Dead awaits, and its hunger is insatiable.